أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا حبيب إله رب العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to question time. In the question time, it's been quite some time that we are looking at Islamic family law, and I have emphasized and I still re-emphasize on this issue, and that is to be or to make oneself aware of the Islamic family law, particularly the laws that we are faced with day in and day out. Our community is faced with day in and day out. For example, the law of inheritance, the law of marriage, the law of meher, the law of divorce, the law of will, the law of maintenance of families and wives or wife, for example. So it's quite important to make oneself aware of these laws so that we don't commit an error or mistake, and while committing this mistake, color this mistake as something Islamic and give a bad reputation and bad name to Islam because of the misunderstanding, because of the ignorance that we have of the Islamic family law. We've been following the structure from one of the books of present scholar, which is Ayatollah Fazil Milani, and this book is available on Amazon and other websites as well, which you could order it and have it at your hand. There's another book which is translated by Lale Bakhtiyar, which is the very interesting book, which is the Islamic law in the 5 schools of Islam, and this is also available on Amazon, which you could download or which you could order it. And these 2 books are quite handy to really look into the difference of opinions amongst the different schools of thought, and also the opinion of the 12 Shias in regards to different laws. This Islamic law of 5 major schools not only look into the Islamic family law, but it also looks into other laws such as prayers, fasting, Hajj, so on and so forth, while comparing to the other 5 schools of thought. Now, if you may recall, our last program was dedicated to the 12th Imam because of his birth was near last week. And we kind of discussed very little in regards to the law of inheritance, because we have reached to the point where we are discussing the law of inheritance. We have already discussed marriage, we have already discussed meher, we have already discussed the defects that validate or annulment of marriage, divorce, custody of children, maintenance, rights of women, inheritance, and that's where we are. And in inheritance, we talked about the different structure or the principles that are there, how there are 3 groups and how the inheritance is distributed. Now today we will pay a bit of attention towards the impediments of inheritance. That's where we had mentioned that we had stopped. Some people, inheritance is a right of the children, regardless of whether the deceased want that distribution to take place or not, unless the deceased have transferred the property or the estate or the money prior to his death. He has transferred the estate, the ownership, to whosoever he wants. Before he dies, he can do that, and it will not belong to him. But if he dies or if she dies without distribution, without transferring the estate or whatever the person have, then that will be distributed according to the Islamic law of inheritance. Now, in regards to the impediments or those things which will not allow the law of inheritance to be executed, first and foremost is the difference of religion. For example, the Imamian accept that Muslims are entitled to inherit from non-Muslims, but the other schools do not. For example, if a child is a Muslim and the parents are not, he can inherit from them. The consensus of all school of law is that non-Muslims are not entitled to inherit from Muslims. If the parents are Muslims and the children have not converted, reverted, or not Muslims, obviously this kind of gets a bit complicated, because if the parents are Muslims, then the children are automatically born Muslims. And if they disown their faith, if they, for example, change their faith, if they convert, if they forego the faith, then this will make them kafir fitri, because there are two types of kafir. One is a kafir fitri, where a person was born Muslim and he forego his faith, then he comes under the category of kafir fitri, and there is no room of him or her being forgiven and reapplying for inheritance or rejoining some of the ties that he has. Now, if he seeks forgiveness from the point of view of the law, he will not be allowed. However, if his forgiveness is sincere, obviously God will forgive him. But as a law, he will not be allowed for the law of inheritance to be executed in his or her case. If it was kafir milli, which means that he wasn't a Muslim earlier, and then he reverts back to, or then he forego his faith, then he seeks forgiveness, then the law of inheritance or other laws will apply to this individual. However, the other schools of thought do not differentiate between a kafir fitri and a kafir milli, which means that they do not differentiate between those who forsake Islam by being a Muslim, by being born Muslim, or those who forsake Islam after one have reverted, after one have converted, he became a Muslim or she became a Muslim, and then she went back to, or she forsake Islam after that. They are categorized as under the same rule or under the same law. Obviously, you have other laws that are derived from this principle of kafir milli and kafir fitri, which doesn't come under the discussion of the family law. It comes under the discussion of punishment and so on and so forth, and death sentences. For example, the Salman Rushdie issue and the fatwa of Imam Khomeini, why it was like that. It's quite a detailed discussion, which unfortunately is misunderstood by many Westerners, by many Muslims even, and they criticize the fatwa of Imam Khomeini here being very harsh. So therefore you have this issue of where a very strong punishment is executed, but the point is that we need to be fully aware of when this is executed, in what conditions, because there are a lot of conditions here. It is not just executed like, okay, it should be done, that's it, in a very fundamental way, in a very harsh way. No, obviously, every law that is executed within the Islamic government, it considers the state of the community, the state of the government, the state of the Muslims who are living in that sort of vicinity, and that also have an effect upon the verdict of the qadi. For example, it's not just like, okay, a thief is caught for stealing and the punishment is to cut the fingers of the thief, but it is not executed just like that. There's witnesses, there is the situation of this thief who have stolen, why is he doing that, what really made him lead to that. There's the issue of, for example, the state of the community, the poverty, so on and so forth. So it's not just like that. So anyway, we don't want to get into the discussion of that. We are just paying attention to the law of inheritance. Now, which I want to point out to that this law of inheritance, there is a difference between kafir milli and kafir fitri. Now, what is the denial? How one can forsake, for example, the faith when he denies the Tawheed, when he denies the messengership or the risalat of the Prophet, and also he denies, for example, the previous messengers, and he denies the resurrection, the day of judgment. This points out to the denial of the tenets of faith. These are the three key sort of principles. If a person denies that, then he will be considered as someone who have forsaken Islam. Now, the other individual who is unable to inherit is in the case of homicide. For example, there is consensus of all schools of Islam, all schools of law, that the inheritance is rendered, is ineligible to legatees who murder those from whom they expect to inherit. For example, the son, na'udhu billah, kills the father, or the father kills the children, or other sort of different groups that we have, and if it is proven that, that's how previously in olden days we have looked at the history, we find these kings killing their fathers just to inherit the throne. They themselves considered as Muslims, and Shah Jahan puts into prison his father, Aurangzeb puts his father into prison, or in the in many of the Safavid dynasty as well, we see things happening, for example, or in other Qajar, in other sort of dynasties, and the Turkish and Osmanis, they killed their own father, unfortunately, to really inherit the throne. We have seen that the Khulafas, for example. Let me tell you something, brothers and sisters and our viewers. There will be no just government unless that ruler is a masoom, or someone who fulfills the tenets or the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. That person will be closer to rule as to have that social justice in the government. So therefore, what we see, even the rulers or the kings being a Muslim, they will not be able to control their nafs, that will become a hurdle to reach justice, their nafs will feel the power, the ego, the tyranny will flow into their blood, because power is something like that. It is nafsi. It is something to do with the nafs. When a person thinks that he has some authority, he loses it, right? And so therefore one have to be very careful when a person becomes a community leader, in charge of the household, in charge of a company. There's a possibility that the nafs might give farib, the nafs might trap, the nafs might fool the individual and make him fall. So that's what it happens, that power is such a thing, kursi, the chair, is such a thing that it blinds the nafs. So one have to be very careful. That's why we find in the life of our maraji, in the life of our scholars, for example, Imam Khomeini, if you look at it, he was the head of the state. But if you go look at his house, if you go how he lived, if you go how careful he was when it comes to that rule, when it comes to controlling and killing his ego and nafs, how careful he was, right? Or even today, for example, if you look at our Maraje, many have gone, visited, for example, Ayatollah Sistani, who is one of the Hafazahullah great marjas, of our era, of our contemporary period. If you look the house that he has, if you look his clothes, if you look his very fragile, very, with that piety, with that calmness, with that, there's no attraction, that taqwa is there. So one have to be very strong to get rid of this ego that come about because of a position. One becomes a trustee of a community, of a center, thinks he is whatever he says. One becomes the president of an organization, he thinks that he is something, right? One becomes the, a resident alim, for example, of a community, he is something, right? So it is very difficult, and it requires a great deal of piety, of God consciousness, of being awake, that not to be fooled by the nafs, by oneself. So therefore, a person who kills and from whom he expect or she expect to inherit, homicide is not allowed. There's a very beautiful hadith in Kulaini, in Kafi, from the Prophet. It says, a murderer is not entitled to inherit, period. So a murderer is not entitled to inherit. Now, it is important to note that intent to murder is essentially for the above ruling to be applied. This is also see, we tend to think that it is very simple. It's just, okay, this is a hadith and that's it, close the books and just, no. Many aspects is looked here, right? For example, if a son digs a pit in the garden but neglects to cordon it off, and his father accidentally falls into it and dies from the injuries that thus sustained, the son is not considered to be a murderer. An accident happened, father and son, the father was driving, the child died, or the child was driving. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of you from calamities and accidents, all Muslims, all mu'mineen and mu'minat, all human loving people, right? So this is not considered as murder. An accident happened by mistake. So the law of inheritance will apply here. They will inherit from each other if that's the case, right? Despite being liable to pay his family compensation for being instrumental in death of his father, right? He has to pay the compensation. That is in its place. That is a different law. The law of compensation, the blood money is something else. But the law of inheritance is applicable here because it was a mistake. There are two things. Now, this is in regards to the homicide, in regards to the murder. Now, there is another complicated issue, and that is the law of inheritance for a father who died while the wife was pregnant. What will happen to that estate? Because the child is not born yet. The child is not born yet. Is the child going to inherit from the father who has died, or he's not going to inherit, or she's not going to, whatever the child may be, right? The Hanbali, Shafi'i, the Ahl Sunnah schools of thought, they say that you have to save one child's son estate or money or whatever his share and distribute the others. The Imamian says that you wait till the child is born. If the waratha, if the inheritors insist that the inheritance to be distributed, then you will distribute the inheritance and you will safeguard, or you will save the amount of 2 children, just in case. If it is one, then that one will be distributed later on, or if there is a miscarriage or something happened to the fetus, to the baby, then again it will be distributed accordingly. Now, another issue in regards to pregnancy, what is the duration of pregnancy? For example, the father, passed away, died, and the child is born after 14 months. Obviously, this child doesn't belong to this deceased, and that child cannot claim any inheritance, right? So the duration of pregnancy, is a difference of opinion, as it says that some of the Maliki, difference of opinion among the schools of thought, and the length of pregnancy, according to them, is, for example, 6 months or so, but the minimum is 6 months. And amongst the Imamians as well, and also the Maliki, who say that it is specified as 1 lunar year as being the maximum period for a pregnancy. It's a 1 lunar year being the maximum period of pregnancy. If the child is born within this period, obviously the child will inherit from the deceased, whatever relationship, according to the whatever calculation and the relationship that the child have, because there are these 3 groups, not necessarily it is the father, for example. The minimum period of pregnancy with a child being born is 6 months, as has been mentioned. Now, there is another complication. There is a law of li'an, that they do la'na on each other by invoking the wrath of God, that the wife have, na'udhu billah, fornicated and the child doesn't belong to the husband. They go to the court of law. If the husband can't prove, then they will call the curse on each other. After that, the wife is no longer, as we discuss in the law of divorce. One of the way of divorce is this lana. We have discussed that in our previous programs. So the child does not belong to the father, because he has done, or he has revoked the law of la'an. Now, the father will not inherit anything from this child, and vice versa, obviously. For example, if the child who is born and he's been given a estate, and the father, the parents inherit, right, from the children. Now this child, which is kind of like disowned in a way, will not be able to inherit anything from the share of the son. Now these are the few issues in regards to impediments of marriage. Another is like a children born out of wedlock, which we discussed later on previously as well when we were talking about, do not have any inheritance element. In temporary marriage, for example, the children who are born from the temporary marriage, they are legal. They are, for example, as they say, halal. They are not children from adult fornication or so, na'udhu billah, but they will not inherit. Those who are born out of wedlock, obviously they will not inherit, period. But those who were born even with a legal temporary wedlock, they will not be able to inherit. Now another thing, despite being strongly discouraged, it is permissible for an ill man to divorce his wife. If he does so and then dies, she inherit from him irrespective of their divorce being irrevocable or irrevocable, provided that his illness leads to his death. Very, very subtle and fine masala issue here. Within 1 year period from the divorce, and she does not remarry after waiting period. See, the divorce takes place because the husband is divorcing the wife. He has a terminated illness. May Allah protect all mu'mineen and mu'minat, lovers of Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam, and all Muslims and all, Allahumma ashfa kulla marid. We say give shifa to all marid, to all marid. If the person have cancer and he is going to die with this cancer in 6 months, now he does not want his wife to inherit, so he divorces his wife before he dies. Now this wife can inherit from the husband because he has died with that illness and he has divorced her just because he does not want her to inherit, perhaps, with a big P, I'm saying that. Even if it is not that case, she does not marry and remains and carries the iddah and so on and so forth and does not get married, she will inherit within a year period from the deceased, from the husband who have died. Because many a times it happens, we are talking about law here, a wife who was divorced without any terminal illness from the husband, and the husband dies after divorcing, and the wife is in the waiting period, thalathat athur, right? That 3 periods that they have to go. So after 1 month of divorce, accident happened or whatever, he dies without any reason of which we mentioned earlier. She will inherit from the husband if she is still in the waiting period. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, you might be thinking that, why are we listening to this? Why are we being educated about these things? Maybe it happens, 5 in 100, 1 in 100, for example, right? This is the law based on the teachings of God. Even if we discuss this and we are spending time making ourselves knowledgeable, there is a reward for it, right? even if I'm sitting here speaking to you, talking about that, or people who have written books on it, and it is not related as, for example, the laws of salat, the laws of fasting, the laws of hajj, so on and so forth, very law of inheritance, this happened, la'an, and an accident happens, the shipwrecks, and the body is brought of a wife first, the husband. What has to do with us? No. It has to do with us. There is a great reward for those who teach themselves the masala, the Islamic values, the Islamic law, because this is the law of God, this is the law of Quran, this is the Sunnah. Prophet was not aware of all of these things. Yes, Prophet had that knowledge. The Imams were not aware of all of these things. Yes, the Imams had the knowledge. Those people who are pious, muttaqi, our maraje, spiritual leaders, are they not aware of these things? Yes, they are aware of these things. So therefore, if we want to be on the path, in kuntum tuhibbun Allah fattabi'uni, if we love God, then follow the Rasul. If Rasul was aware of these laws and he has taught these laws, it is our responsibility to make ourselves aware of all of Islamic law, right? And particularly, like I said, yes, the law of salat, the law of fasting, the law of hajj, these are all discussed all the time. People are somewhat aware, somewhat. Let me tell you this as well. Many of our practices, the way we pray salat, the way we make wudu, are problematic. We think that we know. It is very much required that we keep on checking. We keep on referring to these laws, because many a times we make mistake, many a times we are unaware of it. So therefore it is required, even those actions that we do every day, such as wudu, even those actions that we do every day, such as our prayers, that we should refer, we should read, we should recheck with our scholars, with our ulama. It is very much required. So now, it is important that we make ourselves of the Islamic family law. For example, if a person leaves more than one wife, they share in equal proportion whatever the share might be, With regards to the inheritance, marriage refers only to permanent union. We have mentioned this as well. Now, there are some complicated issues which perhaps we don't really need to look into, and eventually we will be entering into the discussion, and this will be a final discussion of Islamic family law, and that is family planning. Family planning, is it allowed from the Islamic point of view or not? And there are different ways, for example, of refraining oneself of having children. There is, for example, the currently available methods of contraception. It was not there. We don't have any hadith or riwayat in regards to contraception, that you take a pill or you use something in order to not have children. For example, during that period of the Imam's time, there were no pills, there were no condoms, for example. You really can't use they were not there. So there is no hadith. That means, can we not use them now? Right? So, or can we use them now? It is related to the family issues. We should have answers. Islam have answers for everything. Quran have answers for everything. The Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam have left us the principles on which we could base our life. Even if we live 50 years from now, there will be principally issues discussed that we will be facing. Test tube babies, fertilization, all of these things are based, organ donation, these things were not there, but based upon the principles of the Quran, based upon the teachings of Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam, we extract principles and we act according to these principles. For example, there are different ways, coitus interruptus. There is, for example, ovarian cycle, ovulation, right? Sperm transport, fertilization, implantation. So we will look at the family planning, is it allowed or not, as our last sort of discussion in regards to Islamic family law series, and we'll finish that inshallah. Thank you very much for joining us, and if you have any questions in regards to the Islamic family law, please do email us. We do respond to your questions asked inshallah, and if we cannot, we will refer to our offices of our Maraja here in London or even outside, and we can attend to the issues related to the Islamic family law. Thank you very much once again, and thank you to our Hidayat TV as well for allowing us to really deliver this and making you guys reach the Islamic teachings and Islamic values. Ghafar Allahu lana wa lakum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.